My mother-in-law announced at her 30th anniversary party that my husband's ex-girlfriend was the one who got away. In front of 60 guests, including my own parents. She'd planned it. I know she had, because she'd seated the ex at the table directly across from me, close enough that I could see her smirk when my mother-in-law said it. I didn't cry. I didn't leave. I picked up my wine glass and I smiled, and I waited. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My husband's name is Cole. We met at a work conference in Austin. He was presenting a logistics case study. I was half asleep in the back row, and he said something so unexpectedly funny in the middle of a slide about supply chain optimization that I laughed out loud and everyone turned to look at me. He found me at the coffee station afterward and said, "You are the only person in that room who got the joke." I married him 2 years later. Cole is kind. He's the kind of person who remembers your coffee order and texts you when there's traffic on the route you usually take. He's thoughtful in the small ways that matter more than grand gestures. And I loved him for that, before I loved him for anything else. What I didn't fully understand until after the wedding was that Cole came packaged with his mother, Lorraine. And Lorraine had opinions about everything, about my job, about my hair, about the fact that I didn't own a KitchenAid mixer, about how I decorated our living room. She delivered her opinions with a bright smile and a tilt of her head, like she was doing me a kindness. "I just think you could have found someone a little more established," she'd said to my mother at our rehearsal dinner. Not loud enough for Cole to hear. Loud enough for me to hear. Cole's ex-girlfriend was named Farah. They dated for 3 years before he and I met, and according to Lorraine, Farah had been practically family. Lorraine brought her up the way some people bring up a deceased loved one, with a wistfulness that was almost reverent. Farah used to make Cole's favorite soup from scratch. Farah knew exactly how to handle Cole when he was stressed. Farah was so graceful at family events. I'd never met Farah. I'd seen one photo of her in an old album at Cole's parents' house, and she was objectively pretty in the kind of effortless way that makes you feel like you've been trying too hard. I told myself it didn't bother me. For 2 years, I told myself that. The anniversary party was Lorraine's idea, naturally. 30 years of marriage to Cole's father, Gerald. It was held at a banquet hall in their town. White tablecloths, a string quartet, a seating chart that Lorraine had personally arranged. 60 people. Extended family, family friends, people who'd known Cole since he was in grade school. I wore a green dress. I'd bought it specifically for that night, and I felt good in it. That matters, because I want you to understand that I walked in feeling confident. I walked in thinking, maybe this time it'll be fine. The first hour was fine. Gerald gave a toast about how Lorraine had taught him that love is a decision you make every day, and it was actually sweet. Cole's aunt, a warm woman named Bet who always squeezed both my hands when she saw me, found me immediately and said I looked beautiful. My own parents were there, my mom and my dad, sitting at the same table as Cole's cousin Lena and her husband, and everyone was getting along. Then came the dinner speeches. Lorraine had arranged several. Family friends, her sister, Cole's childhood best friend Theo, someone who all call Theo. Each speech was planned, timed, rehearsed. I realize now she'd choreographed the whole thing. The last speech before dessert was from a woman I didn't recognize. She stood up, and Lorraine beamed. "For those who don't know me," the woman said, "I'm Farah. I was lucky enough to be part of this family for several years. Cole's parents treated me like a daughter, and that never really stopped." I looked at Cole. He'd gone very still. Farah gave a lovely speech about Gerald and Lorraine, about Sunday dinners and holiday traditions and the warmth of their home. Then she sat down, and Lorraine stood up and started crying, actual tears, and said, "Farah, you will always be our daughter-in-love. No matter what. No matter what. In front of 60 people. In front of my parents. In front of me. Cole's actual wife." The table went quiet in that particular way, where everyone is acutely aware that something wrong just happened and nobody wants to acknowledge it first. I could feel my mother looking at me. I could feel Cole's hand find mine under the table, tense and tight, like he was apologizing through his fingers. I smiled. Not a weak smile. A calm, clear, deliberate smile. I raised my glass slightly toward Lorraine and nodded, like I was acknowledging a well-played move in a game we'd both been playing for a while. Because here's the thing. I had been paying attention for 2 years, and about 4 months before this party, I'd started keeping a record. It started almost by accident. There was a Sunday dinner, just Cole, me, Gerald, and Lorraine, where Lorraine said, while passing the salad, "You know, Cole was so much more relaxed before. I think he carries a lot of stress now." She smiled at me as she said it. I went home and typed it into a note on my phone with the date and what we've been talking about, just to have it, just because something in me knew that one day I'd need to be able to point to specific moments instead of trying to explain a feeling. Over the following months, I filled that note. The time she told my mother at a casual family lunch that Cole had once told her I wasn't sure about having kids, something I'd told Cole in private once, early in our relationship, when I was working through my own feelings. The time she told Cole's cousin Lena that she'd tried to warn him before our wedding and hoped for the best. The time she called me by the wrong name, not Farah's name, but a name she'd made up, Lauren, using it twice in one conversation as if correcting a slight inconvenience. The time she told me my maternity leave plans, which I hadn't announced publicly yet, had come up at her book club. I wasn't paranoid. I was documenting. After the anniversary dinner, when Cole and I got home, he sat on the edge of the bed and put his face in his hands. "I didn't know she'd invited Farah," he said. "I promise you I didn't know. I believed him. I still believe him. Cole is not a subtle person, and he looked genuinely blindsided, but there was also something in me that had quietly reached a conclusion that night. Not about Cole, about what came next." "I know you didn't," I said. I sat next to him. "But Cole, I need you to listen to me, because I'm going to do something, and I need you to be honest with me first." I showed him my phone. I walked him through every entry in that note, every date, every quote, every witness. He read it in silence. When he got to the part about his mother sharing my private conversation about kids, his jaw tightened. "She told people this?" he said. "Your cousin Lena told me?" "Yes." Lena felt bad about it. He sat there for a long moment. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to talk to your mother," I said. "But I need to know if you're with me on this." He looked at me. "What does with you mean?" "It means if I say we need space from your parents, you back me. If I say we need boundaries, you enforce them with me. Not after, not halfway, with me." He nodded slowly. "Tell me what you need. I want to be honest about this part. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It wasn't a movie scene." Cole looked exhausted and sad and a little ashamed, and I felt for him, because he loved his mother despite all of this, and I knew that. But he nodded, and that was enough. I called Lorraine the following Saturday morning. I asked if I could come by alone, without Cole. She said yes, in that pleasantly surprised tone that told me she thought this was going to be me apologizing for something. I drove to their house and sat down in their living room. Gerald offered coffee. I said no thank you. Lorraine sat across from me in her usual chair, the one she always sat in, and she had that same bright tilt to her head. I put my phone on the table. "I want to talk about the party," I said. She started with what I expected. She just wanted to honor an important friendship. Farah had been part of the family for years. She hadn't meant any harm. She hoped I wasn't taking it personally. I let her finish. Then I opened my phone, and I read the first entry aloud, the date, the quote, the context, then the second. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. I read them the way you'd read items off a list. Calmly, clearly, one after another. Around the fourth entry, the one about my private conversation regarding children, Gerald, who'd been quiet in the corner armchair, said quietly, "Lorraine." She said, "I don't know where you're getting these from." "Lena," I said, "and your sister-in-law Carol, and Cole's friend Theo. These aren't things I invented." I kept my voice even. "I've been very patient, Lorraine." I've been patient because I love your son and I wanted this to work. But what happened at that party wasn't an oversight. You planned a speech from your son's ex-girlfriend at your anniversary party. You called her your daughter-in-law in front of my parents. She was quiet. First time I'd ever seen her quiet. I'm not asking you to apologize tonight, I said. I'm telling you what happens next. Cole and I won't be at Sunday dinners for a while. We won't be available for family events where you haven't run the guest list by us first. If that changes, and if things change, we'll reassess. But I need you to understand that I've been keeping track. I know exactly what's been said and to whom and when. Gerald looked at his wife for a long moment. Then he looked at me. That's fair, he said. I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner. Lorraine didn't speak. I stood up, picked up my phone, and left. On the drive home, I cried a little. Not from sadness exactly. More like pressure releasing. The kind of crying that happens after you've been holding something for a long time and you finally set it down. The weeks that followed were not easy. Lorraine called Cole twice, both times framing herself as the wounded party. Cole was kind but firm. He told her what he'd told me he would tell her. He held the line and I watched him do it. And I understood why I'd married him. Cole's Aunt Bet called me about a month later. She'd heard things, she said. Lorraine's version, which involved me being cold and ungrateful. Bet listened to mine. At the end, she was quiet for a moment. The Farah thing was wrong, she said. I was there, and I felt it, and I didn't say anything. I should have. She paused. For what it's worth, Gerald has been telling her for years. I hadn't known that. It helped to know that. 6 months after the party, Lorraine called me directly. First time she'd ever called my number without Cole being the one who dialed. She asked if we could have lunch, just the two of us. I said I'd think about it. I did think about it, for 2 weeks. Then I said yes. We met at a restaurant halfway between her town and mine. She looked older somehow, or maybe I was just seeing her without the armor of her usual setting. She ordered tea. I ordered coffee. She didn't apologize the way people do in movies, dramatically, tearfully, with full acknowledgement of every specific wrong. She said, I think I've been afraid of losing my son since he was very small, and I handled that in ways I shouldn't have. That was the most she said directly. It wasn't everything I might have wanted, but I've thought about it a lot since, and I think it was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. We talked for almost 2 hours. We didn't resolve everything. We won't, probably. Some things just don't fully resolve. They shift and settle, and you find a way to live with the shape of them. But something changed that day. She started calling me by my actual name. It sounds like a small thing. It isn't. I still have the note on my phone. I haven't deleted it, not because I'm waiting to use it again, but because it was the first time in my adult life that I trusted my own perception enough to document it. That note isn't about Lorraine. It's about the moment I stopped wondering if I was imagining things and started treating my own experience as worth recording. Cole and I are fine. We're better than fine, actually. That conversation on the edge of the bed, the one where I asked him to be with me, and he said, "Tell me what you need." I think that was the real turning point in our marriage. Not the party. Not the confrontation. That quiet moment where we looked at each other and decided together. As for Farah, she sent me a message 3 months after the party. She said she'd had no idea about the context when she agreed to speak, and that if she'd known, she wouldn't have. She said she was sorry. I believed her. I didn't write back, but I believed her. The golden grandchild of this story isn't a child at all. She's a woman who got used as a weapon by someone who loved her. And I think she knew it at some level. And I think she sat with that discomfort too. Toxic dynamics don't just damage the people they target. They damage everyone inside them. That's something I've thought about more than I expected. Gerald still offers me coffee when I come by. I still say no thank you. Some things stay the same, and that's okay. I've thought a lot about why I waited so long. 2 years is a long time to absorb something quietly. To talk yourself out of your own instincts. to smile at dinner tables and tell yourself you're being the bigger person. I used to think patience was a virtue in situations like mine. Now I think there's a difference between patience and self-erasure, and I spent a long time confusing the two. What changed wasn't the anniversary party. The party was just the moment the pattern became undeniable. What actually changed was the night I opened a note on my phone and typed the first entry, the date, the quote, what was said, and who heard it. That was the real shift. Not because I was building a case, but because I was finally treating my own experience as something worth recording, as something real. There's something that happens when you document instead of just endure. You stop second-guessing yourself. You stop wondering if you're too sensitive or reading too much into things. The pattern is just there, in black and white with dates, and when you can see it clearly, you can respond to it clearly. That's what I did when I sat across from Lorraine in her living room. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't performing. I was just telling her what I knew and what would happen next. The calmness came from the clarity. Cole held the line. That still means a great deal to me. It would have been easy for him to soften, to smooth things over, to ask me to give his mother one more chance quietly. He didn't. He did what he said he'd do, and he did it more than once. And I think that's the part of the story that matters most. Not the confrontation, not the notes, but the moment two people decide together what they'll accept and what they won't, and then actually follow through. That's not dramatic. That's just integrity, practiced in ordinary moments when it costs something. Lorraine didn't transform. She didn't sit across from me at that restaurant lunch and apologize for every item on my list. What she did was say something honest, maybe the most honest thing she'd ever said to me, about fear and losing her son. I don't know if she fully understood the damage, but I think she understood that I wasn't going away, and that I wasn't willing to be managed anymore. Sometimes that's where change begins, not in a grand reckoning, but in a quiet recalibration. I think about Farah sometimes too. She got used in something she didn't fully understand, and she had the self-awareness to reach out and say so. That took something. I never wrote back, but I held on to that message differently than I held on to the others. What I know now is this: the people who underestimate you are usually doing it because they need to. It helps them maintain something, a story about themselves, a hierarchy they depend on. When you stop cooperating with that story, when you simply show up with evidence and calm and a clear sense of what you will and won't accept, it disrupts something in them that no argument ever could. You don't have to be loud to be unmovable. You just have to know what you know and be willing to say it out loud. I kept the note. I still have it. Not as a weapon, as a reminder that my perception was always worth trusting.